Welcome to CRM Audio, the Dynamics 365 podcast with Business Solutions MVPs George Dubinsky, Joel Lindstrom, and Shawn the CRM Hobbit Tabor. This episode of CRM Audio is sponsored by Alexa CRM. WordPress powers more than 25% of all the websites on the internet and is the number one choice for blogs, websites, and portals because it's open source, simple to use, reliable, and extendable. Dynamics CRM has become a de facto standard in sales, marketing, customer service, and industry solutions. Now they can work together thanks to the Dynamics CRM WordPress plugin built with love by the Alexa CRM team. Capture forms, engage your users and customers, all without writing any code. Control your site in WordPress, keeping your data in CRM. To build the plugin, Alexa CRM has created an open-source Dynamics CRM PHP toolkit, unlocking the world of Dynamics for PHP developers. Download your 30-day trial from alexacrm.com/plugin and instantly create a portal by connecting your CRM and WordPress site. We thank Alexa CRM for their sponsorship of CRM Audio. So we're in Las Vegas, Nevada for the 10th annual Hitachi Solutions Customer Conference. So this is CRM Audio Sin City edition.
Exactly.
Beautiful. Need some slot machines.
And so technically, when you listen to this podcast, what's said in Vegas stays in Vegas. So as soon as you hear this, it's going to be like one of those. It's going to be like one of those Men in Black neuralizers. So it'll wipe it.
It's like the Mission Impossible disintegrating.
Exactly. That's right. Your phone will explode.
Yeah. We don't have our normal grumpy developer, George Dubinsky, with us. So we brought our own grumpy developer, Paul Way.
Grumpy as you can get.
Right.
So, Paul, your job is basically to every now and then occasionally just say, you guys don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
Perfect.
Chastise us for not being able to write code.
On a regular basis.
Yes,
I think I'll be okay here.
There's a number of people.
And we also brought Matthew Case. Matthew is our token consultant.
That's right.
He also does a lot of training stuff, so we'll talk a little bit about learning path later. And I did learn you're not supposed to say learning paths. It's learning path.
Yeah, they're very particular about the S.
I still don't get though. What do you say when I'm going to go configure 3 learning path guided processes or
3 guided processes for learning path.
All right, so Mr. Hobbit, do you have any news this week?
So we've had the name change of the product several times now.
Right.
We had Dynamics. Microsoft CRM 2016, then we went to Dynamics 365, then we heard it was going to be Dynamics 365 for customer engagement.
Right. Well, no, first it was Dynamics 365 sales and Dynamics 365 customer service.
Right.
Then that was too narrow, so then they went to customer engagement.
Right. So now on the operations side, we had Dynamics 365 for operations and Dynamics 365 for financials, right? Operations was what was formerly known as AX. Financials was formerly known as NAV. Now it's rumored that the new name is going to be Dynamics 365 for Finance and Operations Enterprise Edition and Dynamics 365 for Finance and Operations Business Edition, which would mean on our side it would be Dynamics 365 for Sales Customer Engagement Enterprise Edition, Dynamics 365 for Service Customer Engagement Enterprise Edition. So I was wondering if there's any way we could add more names, more words to that.
I think we're going to need a new segment on the podcast called the New Name of the Week.
Mm-hmm. So what does a partner do when they're building a tool that's specifically for one of the flavors? So let's say we create a widget. So it's our custom widget for Dynamics 365 for Sales, Customer Engagement Enterprise Edition.
I think we still say CRM.
Well, yeah, I know, but so I guess the acronym you could go with for the rumored operations would be D365 for FOE, and D365 for FOBI.
For Fabi and Phoebe. I like
I
that.
feel like Fabi's pretty catchy.
Fabi is...
Fabi.
All right, so Shawn, last week you were doing a presentation about relationship insights.
Yes.
And there was the one mysterious card you could not get to pop up, which was like a case, I think?
Yes, it was if you receive an email and it refers to an issue that the customer is having.
Yeah.
It finds those keywords and prompts you with the action card to create the case. So I painstakingly was troubleshooting my demo environment, trying to figure out why this didn't work. I had all the action cards enabled through system settings, so the system was ready to go. The Relationship Insights was fully configured. What I found was you have to still go into personal settings and engage that to say, I want to have that service card. I want to have that opportunity card.
So each user, at least right now, has to go in and say, I want the case one.
You have to make sure you indicate which action cards and the base cards you want.
That seems like that's something they should work out before they release it.
I'm hoping they do. I would say enable them all and then use the user settings to deselect. But
right.
But we'll see. But once I did that, then it worked like a champ.
All this new stuff we're moving into with the intelligence and machine learning seems like it's going to be great for new users coming on, but it seems like existing users are going to have a hard time trusting it. You know, like we're used to already, used to the fact that sometimes your workflow might not fire.
Yeah.
And so you don't always trust it 100%.
Yeah.
If we have some mysterious machine learning Azure thing giving us recommendations and telling us what to do, somebody somewhere is going to feel a little bit, I don't know if it's going to work.
Right.
Well, I think many people feel that way. I mean,
Yeah.
you're talking about this is a total disruption for people and how they normally used to do things. But
Right.
I do think what's nice about it is it's self-learning, so it just will get better and better as it goes.
Right.
So it is one of those, you're going to turn it on, you're going to communicate to users that, this is going to, provide that next best offer, this is going to provide some assistance. And when it's wrong, just say it's wrong. It's no big deal. But eventually what it's going to do is it's going to find the commonality of what resonates with like their customer base that's going to be better for it. You're going to have plenty of people that are going to be old hat that just say, I don't trust it. I'll just go by my gut. I know what's there.
I think a good example I use with people is clutter in your inbox, because that's machine learning based, kind of gray mail service. And I remember when I started using it, it was really bad. I mean, it like took out legitimate emails from in my company, and so I would check it every day. Now I probably check it once a month.
But it works great.
And it's like there's a few things from CRM UG and Microsoft that sneak in there now and then, but for the most part, it's pretty dead on.
Yeah, and I think that's what all this is about. Is like it'll pick, as it learns, it's going to have to learn you a little bit, and that's what. But also Microsoft's going to make it better as it goes and goes, because they're getting this feedback from not just particularly one instance. It's going to be across the board. So
Paul, your claim to fame, or one of them, is you were the creator of what was called the Data Detective.
Way back when, yeah.
And that has since been rebranded by...
Somebody else took that over and put it in the XRM Toolbox, which I'm very grateful for that they did.
Yeah.
And they made it much nicer, which is great.
And what's it called now? The Attribute Inspector?
Attribute Usage Inspector, yep.
So if you use the Attribute
Usage
Inspector.
Yeah, they got a worse name. I mean, they took the CRM approach, but it is actually a really
the AUE.
Great tool.
Yeah,
the AUE or AUI.
The AUI for XRM Toolbox.
Yeah, it is really nice. You can take the attributes, put it down to Excel, and then you can actually kind of go through and see that data, or see what the percentage of population for that data, which is quite nice.
Yeah, so you can see like what the fields that people are really saying they're using, and then the ones they're really using are often different things.
And what's the limit on that for download?
I think it is still the 100,000 record limit. Yeah. So if you're doing anything more than that, I mean, at the time writing all that kind of stuff, there was really no convenient way to go grab it. What's nice at XRM Toolbox is still a very convenient way. I do think where if you're dealing with anything to that magnitude, you're going to want Kingsway Soft. You're going to want some SSIS tool, or using the Azure Data Replication. And then within Azure, what's nice is if you have that set up, you can just go and run your stuff and scripts and reports and do all kinds of things. So
yeah, it was really useful for online when you couldn't have access to the data structure.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Whereas if you're on premises, running some simple data queries can find that information. I want to talk about a couple of the things we had on CRM Tip of the Day in the last week. We had a couple kind of back and forth. Sometimes we do debates on there, and one of them was about flow. We had one that our friend Jerry wrote, Jerry Weinstock, and he has his rule of thumb saying, assume that flow didn't exist. Can you do it what you need to do in CRM with just the workflow engine, and then use workflow? If not, use flow. I think that's an okay rule of thumb,
right?
But I kind of did the counter side to that, which is I would amend that to say, yes, if you could do it all with workflow, use workflow, unless flow can do it better. I use the example of approvals, because approvals, you got the nice new approval center. Also, email notifications. Generally, I think workflow is still the best place. But I think there's some interesting workflow notification scenarios you can do with flow. Like, I can have a notification go from an email that's not associated with the user, or from Gmail or some alternative email. And I have had clients who wanted to have notification come from an email, but they didn't want to tie up a license for it. Mm-hmm. If that makes sense.
Yep.
Or if you want notifications from text messages or whatever, So again, I think that's still a pretty good rule of thumb. And I think I don't want to be the guy that says you got to use flow for everything. But I think I'm the use the right tool for the job guy. And we were presenting about business process, and that's our motto is use the right tool for the job. Don't be the person who thinks. I've seen two extremes. One is the person who doesn't know how to write plugins, so they try and make a workflow do everything, or the developer that thinks workflows are terrible and you have to write a plugin for everything, so you have what could be a simple workflow that you use a plugin for.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things with that. So one, you've got the workflow versus plugin debate. To me, just comes down to volume. So if you've got like 13 workflows, going out there, and you could write, but when you look at the logic, you could actually organize and clean it up and write a single plugin. To me, there's just hands down, just put it in the plugin, keep the logic kind of there in tune. I think because you run into performance potential issues where, especially if there are multiples or updating the record and things of that nature, can cause frustrations. And then on top of that, the plugin, the real big advantage with plugins is when you can do PreOp. So if you can't do a PreOp on a plugin, I usually look at doing just the workflow.
Right.
Well, another thing, too, you have to consider is who's going to manage it after, right? Right. Because if you deliver CRM and it's chocked full of plugins, and then they need one thing tweaked, one field different, then either they start doing stuff that's kind of handicapping their CRM by working around the fact that they can't access that plugin, or they have to come back to the
asking how often does this process change?
Well, and then are your resources capable of changing it? Because a workflow is accessible to a relatively smart admin, right? But a plugin isn't accessible. But if they have development resources, maybe it is, right? So that's something else to be considered.
Well, and that's a trade-off of performance versus maintainability sometimes within that. So it's a great point.
That can also go like business rules versus JavaScript, because if you could arguably do like one line of JavaScript to hide a whole section versus a business rule you have to do one for each field.
Right.
And so generally we would say use JavaScript instead of business rules because it's more efficient and you can write one line. But if they don't have anybody who can extend that, sometimes the business rule might be better if their logic changes frequently, if they're empowered to do it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And coming back to, circling all the way back to flow, though, I look at flow and I think it's not so much if a workflow can do it versus Microsoft Flow. I look at it as when you want data outside of the system, that's where flow really comes in. So when you go back to what used to be called logic apps.
Yeah, it's based on logic apps.
It's all based on logic apps. And so with logic apps, you can extend those to the nth degree.
Right.
And so what's kind of nice is if you had that, if you knew you had multiple systems going through, and you were building out your logic apps, you could have a nice little workflow, customized kind of backend that more than just CRM can support.
Right.
So I think there's. I look at it like if it's CRM data, just do a normal workflow, no worries. When you're wanting to have it as some form of integration, that's when Microsoft Flow really takes.
And I think to me, still anything that's mission critical, our business is injured if this doesn't happen. Workflow is a better option.
Right. I would say plugins
currently
are the best option
with
there.
plugins. Yeah, you're right. But something inside the CRM box is better than something like Flow.
Absolutely for that. Absolutely.
Because it's something that right now there's better monitoring tools for it. Now that may change down the road. And if you look at like in SharePoint now, you can run a flow from within SharePoint. So things like that. I think it's moving in that direction.
Well, and when the flow controls are more manageable in CRM, I think that's going to add a big factor. Even though Flow's not technically in CRM, being able to manage it from CRM is going to make it even a bigger deal.
Right. And I think there's competing performance. There's competing performance arguments with workflow. The performance challenges are if you have a high volume and your asynchronous service gets overloaded, your whole CRM system bogs down. Whereas offloading things like wait conditions to Flow in some cases makes sense because it doesn't have the performance impact. However, the more flows you get hitting the CRM service, you could have a performance impact that way too.
Well, yeah. So I mean, in general, long outstanding wait conditions is never a good design within even within workflows. So you don't want that.
Hear that, George?
And that's where a Flow can do a scheduled job. So instead of waiting job, you can say at 5 o'clock every day, check.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a great point. I mean, because normally what you have to do for something like that is, I think, more of the SSIS route, right, and having that to kind of kick it off. So Flow has some advantages for sure over the fact that CRM lacks that cron job. I mean, people use the bulk delete service or whatever it is as like a hack. To try to do some scheduling of jobs to avoid the wait conditions, but really that's not what it's ever intended for.
Right.
But having something like having Flow kick that off, or I still have plenty of people that use SSIS for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, if you've got SSIS, it's super easy to set up a job that runs once a day. The classic, I want an email to go out to everybody that has a birthday this month. Have a job that runs once a month and finds everybody with a February birthday. For one thing, you can take the birthday field that says 2/5/1978 and figure out everybody who's February, and then have that update something that triggers a workflow that sends an email or something. Mm-hmm. That works well. All right, another tip, and this actually came from a project we had where common challenge. We came up with a solution that it kind of cobbled together. Sometimes when you have a problem, you find part of the solution here and part of the solution there, and putting them together, you have that eureka moment, and this was it. And this is the ongoing challenge of duplicate contacts in Outlook. So like you deploy and you turn on contact synchronization, and it downloads your contacts, and you already have Paul Way in there, and it downloads another Paul Way, and there's no obvious merge functionality. What we discovered is, after that happens, real simple action, you can copy the ones that have the vCard icon, not the synchronized ones, but copy them to another folder and drag them back, and then it pops up and says, Outlook has duplicate detection. It'll tell you, we already have a Paul Way. Would you want to merge them? You hit yes, and it'll merge them. And it will actually merge your contact with the synchronized one. Now, here's where it gets weird. I noticed that some of them would be syncing and some of them weren't. And I figured it out, it's duplicate detection. If you go to the mailbox record, if you have server-side sync, and go to the alerts, like the audit alerts, for each one of those, there's already a contact. You'll see a Paul Way already exists, so it can't update the contact. Because on an update, if there's a duplicate detection rule, it will still trigger the rule. So you can go through and hit yes for all those, or you can just turn it off, and it worked. So the beautiful thing is they had years of notes on their personal one, and the synchronized one didn't have those notes. By dragging them out and dragging them back, we were able to update them, and they're all synced now.
It's incredible.
It's a beautiful thing. So I'm going to...
You could have a blog post on this.
I did.
Oh, you did? Oh, beautiful. Okay, I love it.
It's one of those things that I think because you'll get duplicates with you sync. You're going, and this is a lot. So many people
expect perfection and then they're disappointed. If you're like us, you expect things to go wrong, and then when they work right, you're happy.
That's right.
It's just a different perspective. It's like you having kids. If you expect your kids to be little angels that respect you and always speak kindly of each other, you'll be disappointed every day. But if you
Every single day.
expect them to fight nonstop and they get along for 5 minutes, you're going to be a happy person.
And I say that, and I only have one child.
My kids respect me. I don't know what's wrong with
my
you guys.
kids.
Yes.
They're not scared of me. They're just
How old are they?
So Matthew, you are one of those people that really enjoys training.
What exactly do you mean by one of those people?
I mean,
Weirdos.
I'm not a trainer, and I've done it, and I can do it. It's just not I'm not a teacher, and
I don't have the patience for
And
it.
Matthew's incredible.
And it may sound super cheesy, but at its core, I have a lot of empathy because I've been in the I have no idea what's going on seat before, right? And I sincerely care about people succeeding, and so that's what drives me.
So you have when you saw Learning Path, you were truly excited. This was like a dream come true for you, and you've been playing with it a lot. And I want you to give your honest assessment of what's good about it. What are some of the challenges you see right now?
What were we just saying about expectations of things being perfect, and then all of a sudden things?
Exactly.
The reason I got super excited about it is because, first of all, we all understand that we spend time making these materials, documentation. We deliver it to the client, and ultimately, maybe it gets used, maybe it doesn't, right? Because frankly, it's not in the right place at the right time. If a user is trying to create an opportunity and they don't know how to use the business process flow, do you think they open up their company's SharePoint, find the file for CRM, and then open the folder? I hope so, but I know it doesn't happen.
Right.
And so I got excited because I thought, well, here's help where they need it, when they need it, and it's in a format that can be very simple and short. Right. But then I went in, I created my own environment as soon as it was released, and I started creating them, and I was like, wow, there's some improvements to be made on this. And then the other thing that became immediately obvious was it is a very simple tool, but its simplicity is deceptive. Because it's such a blank slate that somebody could do something really bad, just like letting somebody configure their own entities or build their own form. They're like, oh, I got this, and you're like, what? Did a 5-year-old build this form? Sometimes, so
it's kind of like every time CRM does one of those things, I have the thought in the back of my mind, like the data import service that lets you import 1 million records really quick. This could be the way you mess up your system really fast.
Yeah, and I think that I still see the huge potential because it is a blank slate, but you have to go into it. If you're thinking about this is a good thing for my organization, you have to build process around it first, right? How are we going to use this, right? Do we want to use the sidebar only? Are we going to use it in more of a list format kind of thing? And I'm kind of brainstorming right now on what are the best ways for this to be leveraged, because I haven't seen a lot of great examples.
Do you find that when you compare the sidebar with the guided process, is one of those two kind of more mature than the other?
The sidebar is more foolproof in my opinion, where nothing's ever going to change, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a cool feature that you may or may not have noticed, but when you try to place one of the little bubbles on the guided paths, all the fields glow, right? And they glow green or blue. If it's green, orgs are near, right? No, just kidding.
It's blue.
Oh, it's blue orgs here.
Yeah.
No, if it's glowing green, it means
I wasn't expecting a Sting reference. Very nice.
If it glows green, it means that future updates will not affect the placement of that guided path. Now, the blue ones, Microsoft says, "Hey, you don't have any guarantee from us, right?"
Yeah.
And so, but I don't even know if I trust the glowing green. Right? There might be changes that do affect those placements. So the sidebar is easier to comprehend. It's easier to build, easier to manage. So I think my recommendation for an organization that was starting is start small and do a couple sidebars, see how it works, get some user feedback, and then go from there.
Right, and I think another glitch we found, well, not really a glitch, but some of the documentation has been somewhat rudimentary. And so, one thing that I think they're adding this to the documentation now, but one thing that's not really clear is if you want to create one that you use on mobile, you actually have to create that from within mobile. You have to pull up the mobile simulator and create it from within that. You can't just create one. It looks like you can just create one and check the mobile checkbox, but that will not show up.
And just to be clear, you're not creating it from the mobile app, which would also be a logical path. It's the mobile simulator from a browser.
You have to go
then
you have to go to
it up.
CRM Tip of the Day and find out how to use CRM for tablets, not in tablets. There's you have to use Chrome or Firefox.
Wow.
So it's and it was something where, again, there's the checkbox that exists there that says I want this to be in the web client, I want this to be on mobile, and it seems like really intuitive, like, oh, of course now it's going to be in mobile. And we've had people that have thought it was broken, and we thought it was broken because the learning path wouldn't pop up in mobile, but we did it wrong. It was our fault.
Right. Well, I think there's a couple takeaways here. One is whether you use learning path or not, using things like short video clips and things like that are better, in my opinion, than a Word document. If you look at Derek Borman's Tipster's Guide to on CRM Tip of the Day, that are 5 minutes to the point, showing how to do something, those are the most effective way to learn stuff.
Absolutely.
Right.
And so once you have those and build the content, then learning paths is one of several options of how to present that to you. At a minimum, using the sidebar as a kind of a custom help where I have a menu of all my videos from which to choose from is helpful.
And that's where I'm talking about strategy as well.
Well, I was just going to say, from a training perspective, I would say across all our projects, the on-site going through exercises, forcing them to do it, is really, I think, second to none. We've seen just user adoption is the easiest through that because you're walking through, and some people have had good times with that where they've done little. I think the coolest one I saw was someone did a scavenger hunt party where they had to go through and fill in things.
Was drinking involved?
Drinking was actually involved. They had
CRM
margaritas. They had margaritas as your success when you.
It's like drunk history, drunk CRM.
That would be amazing.
Can you gamify learning paths?
I'm sure. No. Shawn. Seriously, I've been thinking about this because again, it's such an open platform that really it's up to you to decide the process, and you totally could. I haven't thought about that specifically, but
because aren't they?
That's the idea.
When you initiate a learning path, does it log anything to the user?
So the
okay, I guess I got it.
But what
survey said no, thank you.
Right, but what you could do, is the user action in CRM could be if it's creating records, right? The learning path leads them to create a certain record. You might be able to do some measurement with that. So
right.
Yeah.
So on the more general training topic.
Well, hold on.
He's got more to say.
The takeaway, the takeaway that I wanted to make, because we've been dogging on it a little bit, right? I want to before somebody just writes it off and says, "Well, I'm never going to use that product." It is the best thing I've seen to date for long-term adoption, right? Paul said, the strategy of on-site hands-on is great. Yes, but this is also something that the gift that keeps on giving.
Right.
And think about it from your help desk strategy, where if you're getting the same CRM question over and over again in the same place in CRM, if you have a learning path that answers the question in that place during that action, then how many less calls are you going to get to your help desk, and how much is that going to mean in less time back to you as a company?
Right.
So there are strategies there where it will pay large dividends if you take the investment to learn it and build it well.
That's interesting, but also you might want to consider taking that same video and making a knowledge base article about it, and then having somebody at the help desk send a link to that, or having the knowledge base or have the learning path linked to the knowledge base article.
Well, we've seen people even take videos. They host them in the 365 videos that are there, and then just have that URL for each entity basically linked as a ribbon button. I mean, and granted, it's not It's not as nice by any means,
Right.
but it's right there. It's referenceable, and so when you're on it, you just click on the video and
Well,
go.
and that's where the sidebar comes back into it. Because if you're on an entity, you click the question mark up there, the sidebar pops up, and it would have the video that's relevant to that entity.
My question related to that is when you're deploying Dynamics 365 customer engagement, whatever the name of the week is,
Yeah.
and you're
D365.
thinking,
Is that what it said?
when should I do my training? Is always a question. Because you do it too soon, people forget everything. You do it too late, people get frustrated. How do I decide when's the right time to do that in-person training? What should our strategy be after we go live? Should we do another round after a while? What do you think?
No, that is a fantastic question.
Well, thank you.
The short answer is always, right?
Okay.
I think that you should use every communication with your end users as an opportunity to educate, right? And that I think the other fallacy that people oftentimes trip up on is that CRM or that big training kickoff, live training kickoff, is the first exposure that the end users have to the tool. Where I'm starting to believe strongly in pre-training, where you give them little nuggets, give them some intro videos to general navigation and stuff like that, so that they come to the training a little bit more ready for the knowledge that they're going to get. You mentioned after the training, right? So I think you should go live immediately, right? Where ideally an end user should be able to leave the training, log in, and start using it that day. Because if they're excited about it, you want to capitalize on that excitement. Right. And then I think ongoing resources. This week at our conference, I've heard several people talk about using office hours as a tool. I love that, having once every week the same time. You have somebody that's available for an hour to just answer questions for people, right?
Right.
Also, I've seen forums used before. That can get a little bit crazy. You have to make sure somebody's managing that and actually responding to people in a timely manner. Yeah, exactly. CRM, Facebook. But then I also think that there should be a more formalized month after training as well. And whether the client conducts that or someone like us conducts that, whatever. But that's another time to resolve some of the frustration that's built up over, just probably user error, right?
Right.
Well,
but once they use it, the questions become more real.
Yeah, the first question I always ask is, are we coming from a system that they were using that was all of this, or is this a brand new, net new system? If it's a brand new, net new system, then pilot it. Start small and increment larger. If you're having a drop from an old system to a new system, which is really, I think, a lot more of what you were answering, that's a more difficult challenge. And I think you hit the nail on the head, which is frequent communication early, and then when they get into the training, there's going to be some people that completely miss that, but there's going to be some people that already come in kind of knowing what's going, and you start seeing quickly, you can move the class overall faster, which is much nicer.
Yeah.
But then after the fact, I look at more at analytics of how are people using the system. I like to see quantitatively, what are we getting out? What are people missing?
You can do that in the system?
Absolutely. And so it's but that's where I do think the videos come in handy. The downside with the training, which I love doing the on-site training, I'm terrible at it, you're fantastic at it, but it's the best thing to come out to me is that users walk out of there, to your point, ready to pretty much use the system. So I think you have to have the UAT or some test environment for them to be able to get into and play around with and can kind of continue the training on their own. Some users will take the initiative to actually go do things like the normal day in their life,
right?
Which is nice. And that usually get great feedback with, and hopefully you don't come out with any last minute bugs or anything, but you're better to catch it there than you would be after go live. So
yeah.
So Matthew, you have like over 8,000 hours of training experience, which is really impressive for somebody who's only 22 years old.
It took me a really long time to count.
So, do you have any training war stories? Not just about CRM, but what's like the most awkward training experience that class you walked into?
probably.
I still have awkward experiences every time. For example, last week, I brought up some kind of like off the cuff example of like Well, let's imagine that your organization went through some hard times and you had to purge and fire half your staff, and then you guys had to take over their clients, and then it got really quiet and everybody started looking at each other, and I was like, oh my gosh, did that happen before? And then it got more awkward, and I was like, let's just pretend I didn't say that. Okay, new example, and reset. So also, salespeople oftentimes, it's hostile. It's a hostile industry. You eat what you kill kind of thing. And so
right.
They're very protective of their processes and the way that they do things. And so somebody coming in, I have been beat up multiple times by salespeople, literally. No, just kidding. But, where if I didn't understand where they were coming from, or if I was trying to be macho and be like, listen, you don't know anything, old man, right? This new technology is going to plow you under.
When did you ever talk like that?
You know me. I'm a real hard A.
When he's
right?
on the street.
Yeah. So, but again, coming from the approach of just I guess more empathy and sincerely wanting to help them, that's served me a lot better.
Yeah, that's what makes a good trainer. People who are take no prisoners and hard nosed. You got to do it this way. You got to put yourself in the shoes of the person that you're training.
Well, some of that's actually, I think there's a generational difference there too. I remember my bosses previously, that was their whole thought was, no, you just tell them to do it, they'll do it, and that never really worked.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and sometimes you get into organizations with the culture, that's what they think's there.
Right.
But the reality is, no. I mean, our approach has always been, we want users to want to use the system. And so sometimes if that's coming from another system, we got to make sure we have more bells and whistles than what they had before, and
right.
things have to be faster and smoother and easier. So
what do you see, Matthew, for the most successful organizations deploying CRM? I know there's a variety of ways to do it. Some people have dedicated people who are focused on training. Mm-hmm. Some people have where that's part of what they do. Some of them don't have somebody and they rely on a partner to do it. Mm-hmm. What's the optimal there? Is it you have somebody on staff that training is part of their job?
Yeah, I used to, at our company we call it the train the trainer approach, and I used to actually cringe when I heard it because my philosophy is that our group and people like us, we know CRM really well, and when you train on CRM, it is probably 80% CRM, 20% industry, process, company specific, right? So my argument is it's easier for us to learn the 20% of their industry, processes and company than it is for their trainers, whoever they may be, whether they're corporate trainers, that's their title, or if they're just nice volunteer salespeople. It's harder for them to learn the 80% well enough to do a great job training. But that said, recently my stance has softened quite a bit, where we've had a lot of success with train the trainer. And the difference has been, instead of just training them and giving them the CRM knowledge, in addition, giving them tools on how to present the knowledge well, right? So, and this is kind of starting to get into some of the change management, philosophy that really is pretty tightly tied to good training techniques. So, I forgot the question.
Well, you're speaking about some of the changes that we're making at Itachi to get better at it. I mean, the thing about all training the trainers is if they have a trainer that has a good experience, I look at a trainer like the same way that good trainers can train on anything.
Yeah.
It's almost incredible. It's like this gift. I don't have it.
And that's where, Matthew, what I appreciate you do is you get involved early. Too often it's, that training, we'll do that when we're done and we get in the weeds and then, but you also do good, like you said, OCM, asking what ways of training have been effective in the past, what have not. Maybe videos work, maybe videos don't, maybe a training manual, maybe a learning path. You're finding out what works for people and what they can support going forward. And then, then we're in tune with what they want to do. It's not just, let's train the trainers 5 days before we go live.
Well, and a couple of their tips too is just, for the trainer, know your users well, right? Mm-hmm. Walk a mile in their shoes. I have shadowed, some employees for an entire day, and it's given me a lot of insight into like what do they do and how can CRM make their job easier, right? Training one path is super important, right? That's the thing that I think is really critical and have been training this way recently is, there's 5 ways to do everything in CRM. And I've seen trainers and I've trained where I've been like, oh, to create a contact, you can come here, or you can come here, or you can come here. And you feel like you're giving these people lots of tools and lots of options. So you're like, there's no way they can fail. But what you're really doing is just filling their brain with too much. And so I've now I teach one way. I teach one path to do everything. And they will find out other paths, and that's great. I want them to do that. Or in subsequent trainings, teach them new ways. But one path is a very easy way to build training, and then it's a very easy way to execute training.
Well, getting back to learning path, how reusable is that for partners across their deployments, their customer deployments?
Oh, that's a really excellent question too. I would say not very much, unfortunately. For some maybe general navigation information, like you definitely could build.
You can export out the sidebar content.
It's similar. It's similar to a solution the way it works, and you can export it and import it again. But the problem would be is if the field placement or that column doesn't happen to be here, and you highlight that in your learning path in a new environment. But
that's specifically the guided process. If you had sidebars, content, like custom help for your solution, I think that would be a good fit.
Yeah. So more in the ISV realm, I think it's a lot obviously.
And thinking broader, right?
But if you had a managed solution that locked the form down too, for an ISV. All right. Well, definitely, if you're not focused on training and you're deploying Dynamics, you need to. So that's the takeaway.
No doubt. One thing I'll add to that real quick, as a tip that Matthew does, is that, like you mentioned early and often, he makes sure earlier in the project, so well before we're even scheduling people and where they're going to go, he's already working on getting the scripts written and the user guides kind of produced. So the content there can be reviewed, revised, and kind of cleaned up, and then that helps both understand the business side as well as that one path that he was talking about. So that makes things a lot easier to where we can get to that earlier in the project than normal.
If I get brought on as a trainer for future projects at the beginning, I actually want to be at the discovery session just to do training discovery within the training discoveries or the overall discovery session. So.
Right, and that's the importance about specific application and user training. That's for users covering your process. I do think there's a place for the more generic training, especially for system admin topics, or if you want to teach somebody how to customize. There's a lot of great trainers out there. Microsoft has them. Many of our MVP friends, like Larry Lentz, do a really good job at that. And so that's one thing I actually encourage clients to have people have somebody that is maybe a good candidate to learn how to configure CRM. We provide that, but where our sweet spot is as we're developing and deploying a solution, crafting training around your specific scenario or our industry solutions. Whereas if you want to learn how to customize CRM, there's a whole slew of if you're a partner, the Dynamics Learning Portal has all the great Derek Borman videos, and people like David and Julie Yak, and there's a number of good places where you can get good core training. You don't want to do that for your end users. You don't want to send your salespeople just to a generic CRM for sales team unless you haven't changed anything, which is nobody. You want to get more specific training probably from your partner. So that's good. A good reminder. Training is something that too often gets cut from the budget or ignored. And point is, don't ignore the training. So Paul, switching to more of a developer-related topic. In the roadmap, and I think we referred to this last week, one of the exciting things that has now shown up for the spring release is virtual entities. And that is, instead of forklifting all this data into CRM and eating up all your storage space for specifically reference data, you will be able to create an entity, link it to an OData feed or some kind of a data feed, and make it feel like it's in CRM, even though the data is somewhere else. Even talking about making things like advanced find, work with it make activities work. It feels like we're on the cusp of a major shift in how we're going to do integrations.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for really any third party with the data, this is going to be a major difference, and it's going to make integrations much easier.
Yeah.
Because the OData, universal, and so now being able to take advantage of all like things like advanced find, like you mentioned, and things of that nature, that's going to be huge. I mean, we're really rarely, we try not to actually replicate pumping in data, and so sometimes we're just doing, JSON-P calls out there to go out and query for some of the stuff and just embed it, integrate it in. But that's some work because you've got a developer actually having to build that, put it as a web resource, display it on the form, and then we don't get the benefit of having it, advanced find and things.
Well, you and Shawn just came off a project where I think you had to move like 5 million records.
We did,
and
1 million of them we could have easily put them in.
And even if you write it the integration right the first time, you're going to take at least several days to move that data.
If not more.
Not more, sometimes weeks.
Mm-hmm. That was very frustrating. Since
we are sponsored by Kingsway Soft, your question might be, oh, great, I don't need Kingsway Soft or Scribe or whatever. And I would say that's not necessarily the case because, yes, you'll be able to take an external data feed if there's like OData and expose it. However, most people don't want all the granular records. They want a summary of some kind. Or they'll have a legacy system that doesn't have an OData feed, and you'll need to get it somewhere like Azure where you can get it. So I still see a big use of Kingsway Soft to either do some transformation into a more readable format, but it's going to be a lot less time than moving it all into CRM.
Yeah, I think having, SSIS with Kingsway Soft coupled with CRM, I still think is like where you want to be. Just in general, because the problem is when you start choosing ways around what Kingsway Soft can do so easily, and then you end up having all these little choices where they add up to the point where you could have saved 100, 200 hours of if you just had done it through more of an SSIS integration. So I don't see anything going on with Kingsway Soft with this. I look at this more as what's going to be really nice is a company like CapIQ or Blue Matrix or FactSet or some of these financial services companies or any of these companies with data, quality data that says, hey, you want to expose this in CRM? Perfect. Here's our data feed. Virtual entities, they have a solution a managed solution that contains all that, and then boom, you've got access to the data immediately.
Right.
That's huge, and that's one thing that we and with no or minimal data cost, that's going to be associated to your storage because it's just going to be the entity structure. Right. So that's where I think things would be really, really nice, especially because you can reference that data as if it is, to the point where, and then once we see the CRUD operations kind of come potentially down the horizon, that'll really open the door to, I think, more of that. To me, that's really more when Azure Storage starts or Azure SQL starts looking in tune with CRM.
Right, when it's consistent platform.
And that's where add the virtual entities to what we now have with the export service. And those two things taking much of the pain potentially out of online integrations, because the pains you had were on the feeding and then the receiving, because you couldn't do SQL queries against it. Now you can with Azure, and with near real-time replication, and now reducing the number of things. And for years we preached the 360-degree view, but in reality a lot of times it's more like a 270-degree view, because you don't give everything because of the cost or the storage needed to really show everything. This to me gives us the potential to get closer to a true see everything from one screen kind of thing.
Like 315 degrees.
Maybe we might even hit 320.
Okay. 320, 321, whatever it takes.
So let me ask you a question, Mr. Developer. So with the notification a while back that sometime after version 9, the legacy endpoint is going to be deprecated, saying you should consider using the web API. But I also hear developers saying there's still some limitations in the web API. What are you seeing? Are you seeing most of the work you're doing now you can use the web API, or are you still finding cases where you need to use the old?
Yeah, we generally go to the web API, or use the web API for about everything that we're doing. So I would say we've either found workarounds. Now, we've submitted a ton of random little bugs within the web API. You know? And so some of that is like when you were doing, we would get random speed performance things where you can go in and you're doing like a compare, and you were saying, hey, I want to look and say, is it any of one of these 5 values or 10 values or whatever it is? But when you get up to like 20 or 30, it would all of a sudden just crawl. So those little things we would see, and some of that was just we'd kind of go through and as we'd find them, we'd submit them in. But Microsoft's done a good job of everything. I mean, I'm sure, knock on wood, maybe there's an open one, but
knock on metal table.
But for the most part, it was I feel like it's made definite improvements. And I look at Web API is actually even changing potentially how the portal marketplace will be, just because of the ease. They're making it simpler to connect, which I think is nice, both in how you access as well as kind of what's out there. So,
all right. So last question. And this is kind of our question for most of our guests is, other than the one you already mentioned that you wrote, what are your go-to tools in the XRM Toolbox?
I like to use the bulk workflow execution tool.
Andy Popkin tool.
Andy Popkin, yep.
And give me an example of a scenario where you have bulk executed a workflow.
So I'm probably going to sound like a wiener, but sometimes I get a little nervous when I export a large data set and then make changes on that and import it back in. I'm just like terrified that something else is going to change in it, and I'm going to overwrite things I don't want to. So, or
somebody will modify a record.
Yeah. There's a lot of implications. So workflows early on, I would use those to modify records. However, you're kind of limited to the number that you can have in your view, which at one point was 50 records, and so you run the workflow for 50 records at a time.
Yeah.
And it's like, when you have over 1,000, it becomes impractical. So when
only 4 next pages.
Well, yeah, with 50, it was a lot more than 4. But
if you're, you do kind of sound like that. If you're the guy that complains about hitting a button 4 times.
Well, no, the 4 times I can handle, right? But like it's like over 4.
40
that's my
limit. A little bit much.
So this is a way that I have used. I will make bulk data edits in the system and sleep well at night that I didn't screw anything up permanently. So,
good. Yeah. How about you, Paul?
So I do like the fetch. One that where you can actually go in and execute and build your fetch, which is nice. I did write a little tool called Fetch Tester 3000.
Okay.
And what was funny about it was I wrote it, and then right after, like 2 weeks later, the fetch tool on XRM Toolbox, and so it just crushed my hopes and dreams on the Fetch Tester 3000. But mine was
that like the Fetch Tester 3001 or something?
No, it was a nod to the what was that? Do you remember the old TV show where they would just criticize the
Mr. Science Theater?
Yeah,
yes.
Mr. Science Theater. Thank you. So anyhow, but that's a nice tool. I think my favorite tool though. So I do want to compliment that Fetch builder. It's been very nice. Especially because you can actually go in there and kind of build out fetch that or put, swap in views and things. Now, the downside is if you create a view or a dashboard and you change that fetch, Outlook doesn't support it. So it breaks in Outlook. But it works great for users of ours that don't actually use Outlook.
They should be using the new Outlook app anyway.
No, fair enough. So the next one, though, the main one I would say, my favorite thing, it really was when the ribbon editor had then moved into it, or the ribbon
workbench.
Ribbon workbench.
See, I just don't feel right not using that in the settings.
Oh no, please.
No,
It's the best thing. That's really, and because at some point Scott Sewell just told me, he said, you should write these tools in XRM Toolbox, and I thought, you know what, that is absolutely right. And so now I look at it as from a community standpoint. So I've written a couple things. I need to actually get them out there to the community because I just have my own little private stash. But I like
you got the Paul Way version of the XRM Toolbox.
Recording things for yourself.
I do. But and I like having I think that's the best way for a tool set. Just to be.
This has been CRM Audio, the Microsoft Dynamics CRM podcast. You can hear previous episodes on our website, crm.audio. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes. Follow us on Twitter at CRM Audio, or leave us a comment on our Facebook page, facebook.com/CRM podcast. If you have any topic suggestions or questions that you would like for us to answer on a future episode, please drop us an email at voice@crm.audio. Special thanks to Dale Simmons for our theme music. Go check out his website, dalesimmons.com. Please join us next time on CRM Audio.